You might have seen a couple weeks ago, maybe even over a month ago now, how I'd put together some flyers for Maundy Thursday service, Good Friday service, and then all of our Easter festivities that we were going to do today. You know, a decent amount of time went into, putting those flyers together. And of course, now here we are, and I'm talking to a phone. I'm preaching to a phone again this morning. I don't know about you, but along this journey, I've had to adapt and learn an awful lot. And there's been times when it has been fun, exciting. There's a newness to this in a way, but then at other times, it's just been flat out depressing. Just to be honest. To have multiple roadblocks come up along the way. Even the most recent one. This is after service. First is just canceled for 2 weeks or suspended for 2 weeks. Then we learned the more prudent thing is to let that go on for another month or so. Now, I guess now it's at least until the end of April, and even then, there's the question of what about May? Back before today, I was looking into a drive-in service for Easter. Then we learned that that's not the most prudent thing to do. Learned that from leadership in multiple areas. But even when we were planning that, or thinking about it at least, I came across some different roadblocks along the way. I wanted to get one of those FM transmitters where people could drive up in their cars. We could have that drive-in worship service, and then people could just flip on in their car to a certain radio station and be able to tune in that way to what was going on outside. But I learned, somebody told me on the phone that those were on back order, at least through the company that I was looking at. It was this way for multiple companies, though. He told me, basically this technology was obsolete a couple weeks ago, but now you can't find one anywhere. Just different roadblocks like that along the way. And of course throughout all this, I know that not everybody is able to get connected and plugged in with the online stuff, whether it be our emails or the videos. And and some people have even flat out told me that they're not going to participate in that way. And I say all that just to say, even for me, during these times, it can be real easy to choose despair, to choose hopelessness, to think only in terms of death. How many of us, this is not just, I hope this isn't just, I don't think this is just my problem. I think this is something that we're all wrestling with, have always, it's just manifesting in different ways right now, but how many of us have been easy to choose despair, to choose hopelessness, to choose death? In recent days, weeks, months, how many of us have just been glued to the news? I mean, just absolutely glued to it, looking at those numbers as they climb higher and higher, those total number of cases and deaths in the U.S. and globally, just watching those numbers tick up, and we tune in to see how high they can get. The other day I was looking, and there was even a plus sign beside the numbers, as if to say, oh, you think these numbers are high? Well, they're probably even higher. It's just so easy to get plugged in, to get tuned into that, and think in terms of only death or despair. It's easy to point the finger to others, whether it be to the media or anyone else. Of course, someone said, when you're pointing your finger, you got at least three, three that are pointing back at you. The truth, we're the ones watching it. We're the ones soaking it up. And even if we've backed off a little bit, the ways, our way of living and being just often invites that kind of reporting. How many of us in recent days, rather than asking and participating in how we can move forward out of this, have just pointed the finger or focused on the past, welcoming and sharing even conspiracy theories about, how it started or who's the responsible one, rather than saying, how am I going to respond? How many of us, just dealt out harsh judgments upon leaders who were obviously blindsided by this, as we all were? How many of us, rather than finding and seeking out new ways of community and being connected, have just wallowed in self-pity or despair about not being together in the ways that we want to? How many of us, rather than giving and sharing, whether it's to the church through tithes and offerings or to others, have just stockpiled a small country's worth of toilet paper or eggs or money? Now, how many of us, rather than seeking common ground or shared experience, have just slipped even deeper than we already were into individualism and nationalism, letting this virus, divide us even more than we already were? Rural versus city, American versus Chinese, old versus young, Republican versus Democrat, old versus young. Why do we keep dealing in death? Why do we keep dealing with despair and in hopelessness? Why? Well, I guess we're prone to it. Even sweet Mary in our passage this morning, even she is not immune to this problem. Her grief and despair, just like ours, allows her only to see in terms of death, to see only in terms of darkness or despair. She saw the stone was rolled away. She saw the two angels. They even speak to her, and yet she still doesn't seem to quite really grasp it or get it. She even sees Jesus and mistakes him for the gardener, as some translations say. I kind of imagine a little groundskeeper, wandering around. Mary mistakes Jesus, the groundskeeper. She's focused on the past. She's slipped into despair. She's thinking only in terms of death, and yet we know that Jesus had risen. That Jesus had already moved on up out of despair, out of darkness, out of death. Jesus had moved on out of that. He had risen. We know he was moving on toward ascension, toward the glory of God, toward eternal life, toward the future promised in God. So especially for us Easter people, maybe if you are one of the ones who is focused on this death toll, maybe it's time for you to start looking at the number of people who've recovered from this virus. You can seek that number out too if you want to look for it. That last I saw, it was up to about 300,000 people globally who have already recovered from this thing. What about sharing the story of that 90-year-old woman who's already home now and has recovered from the virus? Or if you're one of the ones who've been pointing the fingers, just trying to assign blame or responsibility, maybe it's time to start figuring out how you personally are going to respond. Are you going to be a positive or negative force with this whole virus thing? Are you going to be a part of the help or the hurt? Or if you're one of the ones who think that social distancing means complete and utter isolation, even refusing to participate in new expressions of the church, then maybe it's time to seek out that communion and that fellowship. Or even foster new ways of being the church yourself. Whether it's online or something else. Or if you're one of the ones who keep buying what you don't need, maybe it's time to trust once again in your resurrected Lord. Or if you're one of the ones who's allowing this virus to just drive a deeper and deeper wedge between you and any other person or any other group of people, then maybe it's time to stop making others a scapegoat and to choose today, on this Easter Sunday, on this Resurrection Day, to choose right now today that as a child of God, you are going to choose hope over hopelessness, light over darkness, life instead of death. That choice is before you today. Resurrection power, which revives and renews, or death, darkness, and despair. That's the choice before you, especially on a day like today. Now, it's easy to give ourselves a hard time. Maybe we do need a good reminder from time to time. I know that I certainly do. But we can't be too hard on ourselves or even too hard on Mary, because we don't want to forget that at the end of the day, Jesus has already done it. Now, he's already defeated death and darkness and despair. Jesus has already defeated that. And really, at the end of the day, what we are asked to do, guided to do, encouraged to do, is what Mary eventually did. How she went up to the others and simply announced, "I have seen the Lord. I have seen the Lord." Now, church, I've seen the Lord. I've seen the Lord in a number of ways. I've shared some of them already. In previous videos, I saw the Lord in the person who brought Molly and I, the gift card. I've seen the Lord in the one who put together a Easter egg hunt for Lily in our yard with instructions, and then how the 12th egg that she found, it had the message in it that Jesus was alive. I've seen the Lord in the ones who have shared their videos and pictures with me about their experiences engaging with the faith-focused station, and then the videos of people waving their palm branches. I've seen the Lord in all of that, and I've seen the Lord in the ones who have waited sometimes with me outside of places like Texas Fish Camp and in other places, waiting outside patiently, knowing that all small businesses are going through a heck of a time right now. I've seen the Lord in those who are appreciating people in our community who have always been taken for granted. Maybe today you're one of those people that we have taken for granted, or that I have taken for granted, and I tell you today that I am very thankful for the ways that you're still going to work and providing these essential services, whatever they might be. I've seen the Lord in the face of my family, who I have been able to interact with more and grow closer to. I've seen the Lord. Even on an Easter Sunday as odd as this one, I have seen the Lord, and I know that He is risen. Have you seen the Lord? Are you looking for Him? Amen.